Welcome back to the Pro Football Hall of Fame for another installment of our Before the Snap series. Today, featuring a very special guest and friend of ours at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, who we won't spoil the surprise yet, but if you tuned in, you know who we're going to have as our guest and a little bit about his background. But we'll get into that here in a little bit. As always, what is this program? You might be watching this program for the first time wondering, what is Before the Snap? Well, Before the Snap, we put this program in place to teach high school, college students, and even young professionals about what it's like to have a career in and around the NFL and all the cool and unique paths that you can take and still have a career in sports. So normally, we do a program here at the Hall of Fame where we talk about all these different types of careers, but today we're going to be focused in on one of those careers and we're going to look, kind of behind the camera, back behind the stage, and see what goes on to make sure these big events can happen in and around the game of football, the NFL, and for us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. If you tuned in with us before, obviously you know you're in store for another excellent program. As always, my name is Jake Ray. I'm the Youth Education and Leadership Manager here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, where it's our mission to honor the greatest of the game, to preserve its history, to promote its values, and to celebrate excellence together. And those values we promote are those of commitment, integrity, courage, respect, and honesty, all of which made are now 382 members of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the greatest of all time. But it made them great men off the field, great members of their community. It makes me a great employee and can make anybody tuned in today who's a student or employee great in whatever they do as well. Before we get started, some thank yous I'd like to pass out. I'd like to thank all the educators, professors, teachers who shared this program with their students, might be watching us live in their classroom, or you're watching us 6 months down the road. We appreciate you allowing us to be a small part of your students' learning experience. Secondly, we have to thank the students. Students, without you tuned in today, this is just Nathan and I asking a bunch of questions to our special guest. But we're here to hear the questions that you have. This is an opportunity for you to network with an industry professional who has a ton of experience in sports, specifically the sport of football. And what better way to start your networking journey than right here and right now? So if you have a question, go ahead and put that into the live chat on YouTube, and let us know what your question is. And if you don't have a question, that's okay. You might want to think of it here throughout the program. But even if you don't have a question, we want to know where you're watching from. So let us know what school you go to, where you are, your name. We're going to see how many great colleges and universities we have represented today. So without further ado, and another huge thank you to our special guest today, Mr. Frank Supovitz. So for more than 35 years, he has been at the helm of some of the world's most prestigious sports and entertainment events. As a senior vice president of events for the NFL, he oversaw the management of events, including the Super Bowl and the NFL Draft. He previously led the NHL's event team for 13 years, responsible for NHL All-Star Weekend, Stanley Cup, and international competitions in Europe and Japan. He founded Fast Traffic Events and Entertainment in 2014, whose event clients include the Indy 500, us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, and South Street Seaport in New York City. Frank is also an adjunct professor at Adelphi University and the author of 5 books, including What to Do When Things Go Wrong, a 5-step guide to planning for and surviving the inevitable and coming out ahead, and the Sports Event Management and Marketing Playbook as well. He received an honorary doctorate in Sports Event and Entertainment Management from Johnson & Wales University in 2003. So with that, we'd like to welcome our next guest here on Before the Snap, Mr. Frank Supovitz. Frank, welcome to Before the Snap.
Thank you for your kind introduction, Jacob, and it's great to be with you today.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure we'll get into it, Frank. I get the ability and super fortunate to be able to work hand in hand with you on a few different events, which I'm sure we'll touch on here throughout the program today. But just like we wanted to start every program, we always like to start out, kind of on this tell us 10,000 foot view, day-to-day basis currently, what your job consists of and some of the things you're working on through your calendar year.
Sure. Well, one of the things that I most like to do is create, manage, and produce major special events, major live events. So among those, as you know very well, Jake, is the Pro Football Hall of Fame enshrinement during Enshrinement Week in August. If it's not August, or if it's not Canton, I don't know where I would be in August. That's where I love to be, and I've been in and out of that role Even since I was at the NFL back in 2005 was my very first enshrinement. I'm glad to be back producing that event with you all as well as the Pro Football Hall of Fame game that happens a couple of days before. I also work on the Indy 500. I produce the pre-race show for them. This will be my 10th year producing that event. And you've heard of the other, you actually mentioned some of the other events that I work on and with the other clients. So producing those events is some of the greatest fun. But I also consult on events. Many times, sports and major venues come to me and ask me to analyze what they're doing, how they're delivering a great fan experience, or are they delivering a great fan experience? And I get to consult on those things, evaluate, make recommendations. So that's another part of my business.
It's awesome, and we are fortunate to have you involved in all the great things we do here as the Pro Football Hall of Fame, whether it be our enshrinement week or the things we do during Super Bowl week every year. I want to just dive in a little more. Let's focus, since we are the Pro Football Hall of Fame, focus on, our one of our biggest, if not the biggest event of the year for us here in Canton, Ohio, and that is the enshrinement ceremony. So we don't have to get too far into the weeds, but kind of just want to focus on that event and some of the things you do for that leading up to the event and then the day of the event as well.
Sure. Well, one of the things that we have to create is the show itself. You know, what are we going to present to the audience? How do we coordinate that with the television program as well? We have anywhere from 7 to 14,000 people in the stadium. We want to produce a great event for them, but also create something that is really televisable, really enjoyable to the television audience that will be joining from around the country. So creating that show, creating the run of show for it, so all the different elements, working with the resources at the Hall of Fame on video content, special effects, scripting for the public address announcer and for any of the talent that is going to be used. So those are some of the things that go into making that event what it is.
Can you talk a little bit about what are some of those challenges that you might face? Obviously, for those of you that don't know, who may have tuned into enshrinement last year, we had about 4.5 inches of rain in about 2 hours, which caused a little bit of delay for the event. So, obviously weather and live events is, kind of at the top of the list, but what are some other challenges you see, and how do you overcome those throughout, your in your world of producing live events?
Well, weather was clearly the biggest challenge of this past year. Actually, I produced three major events over the course of the summer, and every single one of them was hit with a thunderstorm. So that does stop everything in its tracks. There's an enormous amount of communication that has to happen between ourselves and the broadcaster because they have to know what you're going to do. They have to fill the time on TV. We have to take care of all the logistical elements like moving the audience out of their seats because an outdoor stadium is not a safe place to be in a thunderstorm. And then, of course, reloading the stadium and getting everybody back and picking up the show where you think you can pick it up from. Some things have to be cut out, some things have to be changed. When it came to the Indy 500, for example, one of the things that we had to deal with, because we had a 4-hour rain delay for that, was 300,000 people had to be evacuated from the stadium. That's a lot of folks. But what we also had to do was make sure that the track was entirely dried for a very high speed race. So in that particular case, we were working with the race operations people to see them how they were going to dry 2.5 miles of track and get everything back up and running. I know we're talking about a football, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but because it's before the snap and because it's about sports in general, those are the kinds of things you have to worry about when it comes to a game or a race or anything like that. You have to have a playing surface or a competitive surface that's safe for the players. or the drivers in the case of the Indy 500. Players certainly when it comes to the game of football, that you have a safe environment for them to play in.
I think if this title of this program fits anybody that we've ever talked to, I think it might fit you the best because, you are worried about all the things that happen, before the snap, before the kickoff, before the drop of the flag, all those things that you have to worry about. Along those same lines, what are some of the skills that you have to possess? Let's say there's somebody that's a senior in college who loves sports, loves planning events, and this is the kind of field they want to get into. What are some of those skills that they need to start to hone in on it and focus on to prepare them the most for a career like yours?
So events are projects. They're very detail oriented projects. And so a detail orientation is really of primary concern. You have to be really organized. You have to think ahead on just about everything. Any decision you make that can have unintended consequences further on down the line. So being able to handle those kinds of logistical and operational issues, that is really common to most of the folks that work in sports events. But there are also people who have to be very creative, because they're creating the show and they're creating the content, they're writing the scripts, they're producing the videos, they're doing all of those kinds of things. It's very rare that, unless you are kind of on top of all of those details and all the people who execute those details, it's very rare that you have to be conversant in both of those things, right? If you are a highly organized person, you go for the operational side of things. If you are, totally into the sport and understand what it takes to put that particular sport on, you stay in the football operations side of things. If you are a creative person, you can pursue those kinds of things. So remember, it takes more than one person to do an event. It can take hundreds of people to do an event. So having the right kind of skill for the right kind of job is key.
Awesome, and I can speak from personal experience. I think the ability to stay calm when things do not go the right way is super important as well. And just to sidebar a little bit, I got to kind of have a front row seat to see what happens when an event faces a weather delay, and working hand in hand with you and other members of operations teams here at the Hall of Fame, as well as the two different broadcast networks when it comes to the enshrinement ceremony and how everything goes. There wasn't one moment, I don't think, Frank, when you panicked. You kept me calm, which helped. So that's another important piece too. I think you mentioned in the title of your book there as well as you know th everyone said things are going to go wrong. Nothing's going to be perfect or as you plan. It's all about how you adapt and face those scenarios. And to see you do it in person was very cool for me to see for sure.
Well, that's kind of you to say. You're 100% right. Being able to be firmly grounded and confident in what you're going to do and what your plan is going to be as you're faced with these kinds of things, is really important, because you're right. Think of all the details that go on behind the scenes. Something's going wrong somewhere. It's going to happen. That's just the nature of the beast. And our job is to manage those things and try to solve for them as they come up.
Awesome. Well, I know we got some students who submitted some questions both ahead of time as well as live here during the program. So I'm going to throw it to Nathan Martin, a member of our great team here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, for our portion of the program where students ask their questions. So Nathan, go ahead and take it whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Thank you, Jake, for sending it here. And Frank, thanks for being a part of the program with us today. We always love working with you and, listening to some of the dialogue and conversation you and Jake have had. It got me thinking of a quote, and I tried to Google it real quick to see who it's from. And some people say Winston Churchill said it. Some people say Ben Franklin said it. But the quote is, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And that's a pretty common quote. And actually, there's a student, Aaron from Slippery Rock University. He asked about threat matrix, and you and Jake talked about weather delays. Can you kind of just speak to, you can plan for some things. You can plan, okay, what are we going to do if it rains? But there's a lot of things that are just unpredictable. So how do you deal with that in a work environment, but I think even for our college students, it could be helpful. It's important to have a plan for your life, but some things are just going to be unpredictable. So how can you handle those unpredictable situations?
One of the things, Nathan, that we had done when I managed the Super Bowl was we did a tabletop simulation every year. And for about 4 hours, we'd be locked in a room, not necessarily locked in the room, but we'd be together with our phones off. We'd have a facilitator who was familiar with our operations plan, poke holes in it, and propose certain challenges that might come up. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, and your communication systems are down, and what do you do? uh, how do you get in touch with the people that you need to get in touch with? How do you keep operations going? Those kinds of simulated um, uh, operational rehearsals, if you will, were really important because it created a team environment, right? Every year we were in a different stadium. So the people who participated in those Super Bowl simulations were the people who were there every year from the NFL, but new people that had joined the organization, local folks, local law enforcement, local stadium management people, and we'd learn how everybody had a specialty, everybody had a role in solving those problems. What experts can you count on, and who are they, and how do you get to them? So everybody who had a decision-making role on Super Bowl Sunday would be in that room for that simulation. And we'd have 4 or 5 different catastrophes that would be proposed to us every single year, and we would try to solve for those things. Now, in 2013, the last time the Super Bowl was in New Orleans, you may recall it was a dark afternoon because the lights went out, or at least half the lights in the Superdome went out. And we immediately went into tabletop simulation mode, right? We went directly into how do we solve for this, right? We never went through a simulation that included a power failure, but that was okay because those simulations helped us understand how we would solve problems together and how each individual within that organization would go into their main assignment. What do I have to do? What kinds of decisions have to be made? What kind of decisions do I need others to make? And because we did that, we were much more calm in approaching how we were going to solve for the blackout because we had just rehearsed emergency situations about 7 days before. That is really important. It's something that I know that the NFL continues to do today. In doing those kinds of simulations, they actually did one before the Hall of Fame game this past year. So it really did do all of those things. It communicated, who could do what, who was best positioned to be able to solve problems, and how the decision making flow was going to work.
Yeah, when I hear that, I love how it applies to the major events that you've been blessed to be able to work on, whether it's the Super Bowl, the Indy 500, our enshrinement ceremony. But I think about students, and something that stood out to me is you figure out who your experts are in different areas, and all of us have a network of some sorts, and you can figure out who are the people you can lean on. Hey, I need advice on my resume. I need advice on how to prepare for an interview. I need advice on this. Figure out who the experts are in your life, and you can go to them when you need those answers, you need that help. And just the simulation concept is important for our students to think about. Again, are they maybe ever going to be in your seat where they're preparing for a major event like that? Maybe, maybe not. But we can all kind of put ourselves through the mental preparation for the things that we're going to face or we might not face, so that we're prepared for that unpredictable. So I think that's really, really good advice for our students to pull there. This next question is from a student named Joe, attends California State University out west, and he wants to know what events took place that led you to founding Fast Traffic. Was there a void in the industry that led you to that, or kind of what led you to kind of doing your own venture, I suppose?
Oh, that's what a great question. I'm an obsessive learner. I love to know everything there is to know about whatever sport I'm working on, and I also want to contribute uh, across multiple sports. So as the introduction mentioned, I was at the NHL for 13 seasons. I was at the NFL for 10 seasons. I just wanted to do more for more sports and learn about more sports. The Indy 500, I didn't know anything about motorsports, or very little. And suddenly I'm working for the largest motorsports event in terms of attendance in the world. And
The
I
greatest spectacle in racing, I think, is what they
the
call it.
greatest spectacle in racing is exactly what they call it. And I went crazy, just almost as crazy as going to write a thesis or a term paper to try to
Mhm.
understand the cultures of that sport. I worked for the National Rugby League in Australia as well, as a client, and learned about rugby league and all the different forms of rugby and how that game is played and how it's presented. All the traditions, all of the cultural elements of those sports. That to me was really appealing. Um, I felt like I could learn more by being on my own and starting my own company. Um, and it proved to be right because I've probably worked on more different kinds of sports in the last 10 years than almost as many sports as there are. Just pick the sport and I've been involved with it on one level or another. And it's been great fun to do that. So it was really sort of selfish, I guess, to answer your student's question. I found it to be a great intellectual exercise, and that I could bring a lot of the wisdom that I had amassed with the NFL, particularly in the NHL before that, and bring those kinds of learnings to other sports.
And what I hear there, it's a lifetime of learning. You wanted to learn more about other sports and cultures and how fans of different things consume their product, and it's led you to these great experiences that now probably make you better at your trade because you've seen the different areas. So really appreciate that, and hopefully our students can glean something from that. I'm going to keep looking at the student questions. Want to encourage them, if they're watching live, go ahead and keep submitting questions. We'll come back at some point and get some of those included in the program. But for now, I'm going to send it back over to Jake.
Awesome. Thanks, Nathan, and thanks, Frank. One thing I want to touch on before we hit our next part here is you talked about stepping outside your comfort zone and, diving into an industry that you knew, obviously, but this is a brand new venture in running your own company. Um, I want to focus on the idea of networking because, college students are told, we started at the intro. It's so important to network to get to know people in the industry. But someone in your shoes, like that didn't stop when you got your first job or you were working with the NHL or the NFL. I feel like your relationships you built throughout your career are going to lead to these other opportunities for your business, especially when it first started out. So, can you talk a little bit about the importance in networking was for you, not only as someone coming into working in sports, but continuing to develop and grow and work and eventually starting your own company?
Your network is the group of individuals that you are representing your brand to, right? Your own personal brand, your professional brand, the kinds of things that you can do. My networking tip is actually not from a sports management perspective. My degree is actually in biology. And I'm not sure that there were many sports management programs back when I was in college, back in the Jurassic era. Um, and if there were, I'm not sure I would have ever evolved into a sports business person. I studied what I loved. And then I had the opportunity to do something that I loved, and they weren't the same thing. And that's okay. So I'll give you a really quick example about how powerful your network can be when you're first starting out. I was an usher at Radio City Music Hall while I was in college here in New York City. And I just loved being around the theater, and I loved being around, watching how shows were put together and how lighting was done and how sound was done and how people wrote scripts. And I had nothing to do with any of that in the beginning, right? But I had the opportunity to join the management team at Radio City when I graduated college, and frankly, I didn't have enough money to go to graduate school, even though I was accepted. So I said, you know what, I'm going to take a year or two and work a bit and see how this goes. And I ended up befriending um, stage managers and lighting directors and sound people and and some of the folks on the production side of things. And what I learned is you can grow in an organization if you are well liked, well respected, and thought of as the person to do jobs that aren't in anybody's job description, right? So new things come up all the time, right? New opportunities and new lines of business and things. And I moved from theater operations into marketing, and I learned about marketing entertainment products and things like that. And then Radio City decided to get into the production business on the live event side outside of the theater. One of the first things they did was a Super Bowl halftime. And they said, well, you know what? We need people to work in that group. We have a producer who's going to kind of look over everything, but we need somebody who is going to help keep the team together, put the team together, get them to work together and grow this business, this live event business. And I ended up working on my first Super Bowl in 1988 because I was thrust into that role, because it didn't really belong in anybody's job description, but it became mine because I was trusted to figure it out. And so I got my foot in the door with sports by doing that. And then at Radio City ended up working on things like the Goodwill games and halftime shows for other bowl games, Army Navy game, things like that. And then I decided and learned that I loved working on sports events. That's how it all happened, right? It was as a result of that networking. Um, and then so I moved into that at the NHL when the NHL had a role open, and the rest is history. So, networking is about everything you do. It's not just about what you can do for the particular job you think you want in life. It has to do with everything. And you always want to be thought of as that person that people want to work with, that they trust to work with, and that they know you can figure stuff out if it doesn't fit anybody else's job description.
Awesome. I think that's a great way to put a unique spin on how important networking is. And you touched on there, your involvement in the Super Bowl. We talked about the power going out. We focused on that a little bit. So we thought, it's a great transition. As we mentioned, off camera here, something we like to do here at the Hall of Fame is anytime we do a youth and educational program, no matter if it's before the snap with the Hall of Famer, field trip, virtual field trip, whatever it might be, we want to showcase off, who we are at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And we are a museum. We showcase the history of this great sport of football. So we're going to send it out to our great teammate here at the Hall of Fame, Katie, who's in a pretty unique area, one of the coolest areas we have here at the Hall of Fame for our next part. So Katie, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Frank. It's nice to see you again virtually.
You.
So welcome to the Lamar Hunt Super Bowl Gallery here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. This gallery displays the history from the most recent Super Bowl game all the way back to Super Bowl I. There are playbooks, jerseys, helmets on display, as well as every single Super Bowl ring ever given out. Even the Lombardi Trophy that the Eagles just won is here. So we have items on display from Super Bowl 58 behind me, where the Chiefs defeated the San Francisco 49ers in a thrilling overtime game. As you can see, we have a jacket worn by head coach Andy Reid, A ball kicked by Harrison Butker that set the Super Bowl field goal record of 57 yards, which is right over there, as well as items from Usher's halftime performance, like his roller skates, as you can see. So, Frank, you've been the executive producer for multiple Super Bowls, Pro Bowls, and NFL drafts. These are some of the biggest events, not only in football, but in the sports world. So, my question to you is what kind of preparation goes into these events, and how long is the lead time to start planning for these?
What a great question, Katie. Well, it depends on which event it is. But let's go to the Super Bowl because that's kind of the granddaddy. That's the one that's the biggest. It takes about 4 years to put a Super Bowl together. So if you happen to be at the NFL and you're in the events department, you're working on 3 or 4 of them at a time. They're at different stages of development in terms of planning, envisioning, and those types of things. And you're doing everything from securing 30,000 hotel rooms to establishing transportation systems to working with the city on various activations that you might be doing around town, from a Super Bowl boulevard to a Super Bowl village to a big concert somewhere in a big public space. So it takes a long time. 4 years when it came to the Super Bowl. For the draft, it was you were pretty much working on the next draft as soon as you were done with the last pick in the last round of the previous draft. It really does take that long to put everything together and take care of all those details that we were talking about. I would say for most major events, it's a year. It's a full year. Certainly, we started talking about this year's enshrinement, as soon as we were pretty much closing the books on last year's enshrinement, as you know. So it does take an awful long time to do it. And it's funny because most people think that these things just happen, right? They just unfold. It really can take dozens to hundreds of people to put these things together and then evaluate what you've done and get started right away on the next one.
Wow. That's pretty incredible, all that planning that goes into it. Does it ever get confusing, like specifically with the Super Bowls when you're planning 4 years in advance? Like, do you tend to get them confused or how does that work?
It wasn't confusing for me, Katie, because I tried to make every Super Bowl different, even if it was going back to the same place that it had been. So, for example, in 2007, it was in Miami, and then 2010, it was in Miami again. So we wanted to make sure that even though there were 3 years and different teams involved, that it felt different, it looked different, it operated differently. In 2007, most things happened that most of the big events that happened down in Miami. In 2010, because it was so close, in time since the last one, we moved most of the activities up to Fort Lauderdale, which was just as far away from the stadium, but had a whole different vibe. So I never really got too confused because we were always working in different environments, different cities, different stadia, and with different host committees.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your insight, Frank. Like I said, it's good to see you. And Jake, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. Yes, Frank, thanks for that insight. I loved your comment that, some people think that these things just happen. And you just show up one day and you put on an event and you close the book and you move on. But like you said, there's so much planning that goes involved, from the littlest, smallest thing to, where chairs are going to be placed to how much commercial time do we have and what are we going to do to fill that. So I think that was a good insight to, the amount of work that it takes to put on, just a simple halftime show, 2 hour event, whatever it might be. And then you throw in live broadcast and it adds a whole nother level to that too. So I know Nathan has let me know we got some awesome student questions rolling in here from our live viewing audience. So we're going to throw it back to Nathan here to get through some of those students' questions.
Yeah, so this question comes from Darren. He's a student that's watching, and he talked about, Frank, in his question, you got into event planning and these live events, but I think the best part of this question was how did you know this was the career path for you? This is what you were made to do, that you were passionate about. How can the students know that what they're pursuing is what they're passionate about?
Well, love what you do, right? I mean, it comes down to that, and it's as simple as that. Love what you do. If you are working hard and you can't wait for the next day to come around so that you can put your nose to the grindstone and get more of it done, and uh, that's the answer, right? That means you've found that thing. And like I said, Darren, I studied what I loved, and I'm still a nerd, right? I still read National Geographic. I still go to natural history museums. I still love the biology thing. I still love the science thing. But but when I started to get involved in producing major live events, and even before that, when I was marketing major live events, before that, when I was dealing with venue operations, I just I just couldn't wait to come back to work, and so I knew that that's what I was meant to do.
I love that. I love that. That's amazing. And I think that's really what all of us are pursuing. We're looking for something that we can just love to wake up in the morning and go to work. This next question comes from Jose, and Jose is asking, how do you see in your field, Frank, AI being used already, or how do you think it will be used in the not so distant future?
Yeah, tech is taking live event management by storm. I mean, certainly AI is going to help event organizers keep from making mistakes, right? It helps to shorten the amount of time you need to take for writing, informed content, informed scripting. I don't use AI to create those scripts, but I do use AI to make sure that I'm accurate in the scripting that I'm writing. Um, I think one of the other technologies that's really fascinating that is changing both live and broadcast events is mixed reality. So, call it augmented reality, being able to lay a digital environment on top of a live environment. You see it at just about every major event when it comes to television, but you also see it in venue. In New Orleans, there was really a very cool mixed reality moment where the top of the Superdome lowered, and giant Mardi Gras beads flew into the stadium down to the field, and you saw the kind of the opening of the game, if you will, for the live audience. That wasn't done for broadcast. It was just done for the jumbotron and for the enjoyment of the people who were in the stadium. I'm enjoying working with companies that are creating those kinds of mixed reality environments. They're not cheap right now. AI is much more accessible. Mixed reality takes a lot of creativity, a lot of rendering time, and a lot of hardware. Um, AI is also helping on the operational side of things to make sure that concessions work properly, that fan services work properly, that security is effective and efficient. So I see all of those technologies coming together to make for a better fan experience, and that's really what it's all about.
I hear that answer. I think the students probably are excited, to hear that the industry is open to it. They're looking for ways to use it, and like you said, utilize it to enhance the experience that whether it's the live viewer there in person or the viewer back at home to really enhance their experience. So that's all good stuff, I think, for our students and something that would excite them. This next question that we got is I want to make sure I get the name right here. This is from Cody, and Cody is curious. You've talked a lot about the unpredictable and how you've handled it. Can you tell us, throughout your career, what's been like that biggest challenge? You were working a live event and you were faced with fill in the blank, your biggest challenge, and then how did you handle that?
Gosh, Well, the biggest challenge was the blackout in New Orleans, clearly, because think about it. You're in your control room overlooking the field. There's 70,000 people right outside your window, your best customers. They're kind of scratching their heads wondering who messed up. Um, there's about 115 million people watching on television. They don't know what's happening either. Um, you don't have the ability to communicate because your communication systems are down. So that was a major challenge. I would say the pressure was very, very high. Um, and by the way, if you didn't think that that was enough pressure, I had a crew from 60 Minutes standing right next to me doing a story behind the scenes at the Super Bowl. So usually when you've got a crew from 60 Minutes standing next to you and something goes wrong, it's not a good day. But happily, they were able to document, how we responded to that. That was a particularly challenging time, not only because of the huge number of people who were kind of waiting to see what was going to happen. One of the issues that we had was social media, which had already matured, was already starting to speculate what the problems were. And the folks who were in the stadium were accessing social media because they couldn't hear from us. We didn't know what to tell the PA announcer. We didn't know whether to tell them that it was time to evacuate the stadium because it was unsafe. We didn't know why the power had gone out. Maybe it was a fire. Maybe it was a terror attack. Maybe it was a cyber terror attack. We had to determine that very, very quickly. And then we had to be able to communicate with the 70,000 people there, and of course the television audience, that either stay where you are because it's safe and we're going to get the game back underway, or get out of the building because it's unsafe. That was probably the biggest challenge we had, because you're responsible for the people who are in your building, experiencing your event. Happily, it was not a terror attack. We all know that now. It took probably about 2 minutes, maybe 2.5, for the law enforcement representatives and security to determine that we had a safe environment. It wasn't unsafe, and that we could tell people to hang out. We were able to do that by posting that on social media. So that was part of the operational plan. But we were also able to do it by writing a quick script and running it downstairs to another level where the public address announcer was. Because even if you lose power in a building, your public address system is battery backup, has a battery backup, so that you can communicate with all those people. That's by design. So we were able to tell them what to say, and then ultimately we're able to get the game back up and running. So the biggest challenge is telling people what they should be doing, and being informed before you tell them. And happily, we were able to do that.
Some of the things that you said today have just really kind of blown my mind a little bit. You talked earlier about how, Super Bowls, they're working sometimes 4 years in advance, at a minimum, really. The 2013 Super Bowl there, within 2.5 minutes. I mean, credit to our law enforcement. They were able to let you guys know. It was probably a very stressful 2 minutes where the unknown is happening, but they give you the all clear. Hey, it's just a power outage here. We'll get this fixed up. Tell everyone they can kind of stay put. But that's quick. That's impressive to me. So I really just appreciate your experience and your willingness to share this with our students. We weren't able to get to all the questions, so I want to encourage our students. If we didn't get to your question, connect with Frank on LinkedIn. It's posted there in the chat on YouTube. You can connect with him. I'm sure he would love to answer your questions that way in his own time. But Frank, I just want to thank you on behalf of myself and the students. Thanks for being a part of Before the Snap today. We're going to send it back to Jake to kind of wrap things up.
Awesome. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks to all of our students who got their questions in today. I always I love hearing these stories, because it, makes me sit back and learn about, you talked about, Frank, earlier, about always continuing to try and learn. And, Nathan and I take a lot from these before the snap programs, and I specifically take a lot from this one, just learning the process and how things happen and how they're going to happen and who needs to know and how do you get that information to people, and it's just an awesome thing to hear kind of that behind the scenes look into what your job is. So I got a couple things to wrap up here. We got a pretty fun rapid fire question segment here first, and then we'll wrap up with one final question. So, Frank, are you ready for our rapid fire questions?
Let's go.
All right. Question number one, LinkedIn, great way to network or just another social media app?
It's a great way to network. It is.
2, GPA on a resume, keep it on or leave it off?
I like to see it because it helps me understand how committed a student was to learning. If it's missing, it kind of tells me that was intentional.
Awesome. Number 3, social media accounts, public or private?
Public. Nothing on the web is really private. It's you unfiltered, and it's the ones that employers don't always see at work.
Nice. 4, jeans at work, all day, every day, never, or only on casual Fridays?
And it's cool, but not when you're meeting clients or potential employers or sponsors, for example.
Okay. Coin toss, heads or tails?
I tend to decide when the coin is in the air.
Okay, I like that. You score a touchdown. What's your go-to touchdown celebration?
Good old-fashioned spike. Nobody wants to see me dance.
And then finally, if you could describe your job as a flavor of ice cream, what flavor of ice cream is your job?
I love ice cream. Rocky Road.
Rocky Road. That's been a popular answer for our Before the Snap guest this year. Thanks for that, Frank. It's always cool to just to kind of see where everybody's at and hear all these cool answers for our rapid fire questions. So before I ask our last question, again, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, probably planning a big event to be with us here today on Before the Snap and just give us a small insight into what your career is and what you do and how you got to where you are. So our last question here is kind of how we end every program. And, we always joke, sometimes, students only remember one thing. So we want this to be that one thing. What's that one thing you want everybody who watches this program live, watches it 6 months down the road? What's that one piece of advice you want them to leave with today?
I'll give you two because I already said one of them, which is be that person that everyone thinks of to take on a challenge that doesn't fit anybody else's job. I think that's huge. But the second one that I'll give you is nothing is beneath you. You can learn from any experience. So when you get the opportunity to work in this business, get in where you can, and you can move around later, but be open to all that opportunity, regardless of what part of the organization it's from.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap up this installment of the Pro Football Hall of Fame's Before the Snap series today, featuring Frank Supovitz, the president and CEO of Fast Traffic Events and Entertainment, and most importantly, a great friend to us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Again, Frank, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and being a part of Before the Snap today.
Thanks for having me. It was great. Enjoy.
Before we leave today, as always, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, whatever it might be for everything here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We got some awesome events coming up here. Tickets are starting to go on sale for all of our events this summer, so make sure you're following along to all the great things we're doing here in Canton, Ohio. We're going to keep rolling through the school year this semester with some more Before the Snap programs. There is a slight change for the program next week. We will actually be live on Friday, the 28th, with Jasmine Park, who works in DEI for the Indianapolis Colts. So we're going to learn all about her career and the interesting things she gets to do with her job with the Colts over in Indianapolis. So, as we said again, Frank, I want to thank you so much for being a part of the program today. For myself, all of us in the Youth Education and Leadership Department, all the way up to Rich and Jim Porter, our president here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Thank you for everything you do for the game of football, but most importantly, thank you for everything you do for us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
To everybody who tuned in today, thank you so much for watching, and we hope to see you tune in for